We're going to start with the very special and emotional part. Hakham Matloub Abadi dealt mainly for the education of the little children, and he devoted his life for that. Talmud Torah in Halab, Talmud Torah here in Brooklyn, worked very hard to have Magen David Yeshivah, and his great-grandchildren, you can see them, this is the result of the effort of the rabbi, are here today, and they're going to open with a pizmon in honor of Tu B'Shvat. Voices from the past, a very short clip. We picked a few sentences said in the past about Hakham Matloub Abadi. Please pay attention to the screens.
رأيتي أور عين حشماء إيش مرامعة مبواء حكمة مكور السيخ شتورا بحكمة بعيون عموق بيشوع متحدو بو بيهيون إحاد هو يديدي إذيب حبيبي رابع بيداغوك بمطلوب عبادي نروياي على الشلوم التردى حبيلها اليوم مئاز بعد اليوم ل10 שנים תמימות שהיה מורה ראשי ביסודי בתלמוד תורה למחלקות הגבוהות וגם לישיבה של בית ספר התיכוני ומסיימי בית ספר אלמנט. גם לפני מועיל אמריקה שמש 10 שנים כמורה ראשי ומנהל, מומחה ומצוין ובכל כוחו הרענן והאדיר עבד בשכלול וביסוס התלמוד תורה במידה הגונה ומשופרת בתהילה ולשם ותפארת. היה מאיר לתלמידים ככוכבים בנאמנות, בדייקנות ובתשומת לב הגונה. יליד עירנו ארמסובה בשנת תרמ"ט. מאז היותו קטן וחניך נבאו לו עתידות כי הוא בשינה כעין עתיד להיות אדם גדול. מאז היותו עד 22 או 23 שנה היה כבר מורה פדגוג לחברות התלמידים בארמסובה. ובבואו לארצות הברית בשנת תר"פ, כלומר 1920, בשנה זו כבר התחילו לייסד ולערוך כל האפשרויות למען חינוך התורה והיהדות, וזאת היא הבניין המקדש מעט הקטן הראשון שבנו אותו בעזרת בהנהלת ובהדרכת ובעזרת הרב המנוח הזה. ואחריו 2-3 שנים פעלו הרבה למרות המסע והזמן הקשה שאז היה לבנות בית התלמוד תורה הנוכחי שעל יד בית הכנסת. ובשנת תש"ד, כלומר מ-24 שנים, בזמן שהתפטר מעבודתו לחנך הפעוטות, עלה במדרגה ונתמנה להיות מחנך ומרביץ תורה בתור רבנות לגדולים. גם אנוכי ישבתי איתו בחברותה באהבה ובאחווה במשך 36 שנים, 2 פעמים חי. על זה יאמר בכל החיים יודו חסלה, באהבה, באחווה וברצון גמור לטובת הקהילה.
I shall ever remember, with respect, with reverence, with affection, with love, and with tribute, the sacred memory of one of the greatest rabbis I have had the pleasure to meet in our Sephardic community. When we speak about Midot Tovot, we must say that if ever there was a man who gave a stamp of respectability, and if ever there was a man who really recognized the importance of learning, and made this a hallmark of an intellectual knowledge of Judaism and the study of Torah, this was this great man, Hakham Matloub. And the greatest tribute, I think, was felt by me personally less than a week ago. Sitting in the synagogue and talking about a certain law, one of the students who attends the class says, "Wait a minute, Rabbi," and goes over to the Aron HaSfarim and takes out a book and he says, "Look, just last week, this is what Hakham Matloub taught us." And sure enough, he understood thoroughly and we discussed it at length. And I said, here is a businessman who is not a rabbi, a man who is occupied with many problems during the day. And while we sit, he is moved to remember what he had learned. A hallmark of knowledge, the distinction of being a Ben Torah. This is what this rabbi left, an indelible impression. And I am quite confident that what I say now is so very true. Im Zachinu, that we now have a yeshivah with 36 young men Ken Yirvu, who sit and devote every single day 4 to 5 hours studying Torah. I am sure that this Rabbi Matloub Abadi was the epitome of learning. He was the living example of what Torah is. And they all looked up in their subconscious and unconsciously and said, we would like to be Tamidei Chachamim, the same as this great Tamid Chacham. If ever I heard a rabbi speak with a sense of devotion and love and a traditional sense of dedication to Eretz Israel, it was Hakham Matloub. On many, many occasions, to speak about the Kedushat Eretz Israel, to speak about Lashon HaKodesh, and to feel every word, and to admonish, and to speak to the people. Speak Lashon HaKodesh. Teach your children to speak Lashon HaKodesh. Be close to Eretz Israel.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Dweck. I'm a member of the board of Congregation Bet Torah. On behalf of our Rabbi Ari Azancot, and our entire rabbinical staff, on behalf of our executive board and our board president, Mr. Eli Harari, who apologizes he couldn't be here tonight. He has a wedding to attend. It's an honor to welcome you to this special 50th year memorial of our great Hakham Matloub Abadi, Zecher Sadiq Libracha. It's a special honor to welcome the Chacham's family. I think we have the Chacham's grandchildren with us today, and great-grandchildren. Mr. Chuck Abadi is here, the rabbi's grandson, who was helpful in organizing this event. Thank you, Chuck. Mrs. Lina Shalom and her family. We have Mrs. Annette Hiddery from the city, right? Annette's here. Hi. And her daughter, the famed writer Jennifer Abadi. No, oh, you're Jennifer's sister? I know that. And her sister. And if everyone knows Jennifer is the writer of Fistful of Lentils, welcome. Jimmy Sutton's here, Nes Shalom, and all the other great-grandchildren. I know I'm missing some names, I'm sorry. But it really is an honor and a privilege to have you here. Our most special honor is hosting the Hacham's daughter, Mrs. Evelyn Rahmey, who flew in from Florida to be with us here this evening. And she's going to be speaking a little bit later. I'd like to recognize Rabbi Azancot, who planned tonight's schedule, Mr. Sal Haber, our executive director, and our entire staff here in the Knis. I want to thank Rabbi Alouf, Rabbi Mansoor, Rabbi Shamah, Rabbi Tawil for speaking tonight. I also want to recognize so many community members who've kept the Hacham's legacy alive for decades. Young scholars like Morris Arking, Joey Mosseri, Joey Harari from Israel, David Shasha, Rabbi Meir Lanyado, and Rabbi Joey Dana from Deal. And tonight's speakers, who are among so many who still today quote from the rabbi's rulings and his writings. I want to also recognize the many students of the Hakham, including the likes of Mr. Moshe Faham, Mr. Sam Catton, and many, many others who kept the rabbi's spirit alive with their stories, with their recollections, so that their children and grandchildren could retell them to us. I want to recognize Ms. Esther Veron. Are you here, Esther? In the back. She's working on the rabbi's biography. If you have any stories that you want to share or insights, please see Esther tonight, anytime, and hopefully soon that book gets to print. On that note, I actually want to share a well-known story with everyone tonight. You might have heard it. I heard it from Mickey Shamah and from Harry Catton, the son of Sam Catton, who was one of the Chacham's closest students. It was Bradley Beach, probably in the late 1950s, and the community was big into cards. Card playing. Saturday night, that's what they did. That's how they socialized. And what would happen is that after the services on Saturday night, they would wheel out the Chazan's table, the teba, and the chairs would be reshuffled, and the synagogue essentially converted into a card room. Some community members reached out to the Chacham, and they said, Rabbi, this is not right. This is inappropriate. You can't use a synagogue for card playing. In his characteristic fashion, from what I understand, the Chacham said, nothing. He said, I'll be there next week to take a look at what's going on. And sure enough, he came the next week to Bradley Beach, and he quietly sat through the services, and he said nothing. People were curious about where the Chacham would land on the issue. But it would be another week until he'd come back to give his ruling. So he came back the following week, and right after the Torah reading, he got up to speak. And he said something like this. I've been asked about card playing in the synagogue. A synagogue, as you know, is a sacred place, and indeed, card playing is simply not allowed. He made suggestions that the synagogue should have permanence, and one cannot overstate the holiness of a sanctuary. That said, he continued, I know that cards is how you socialize. You work hard every day making your livings, and you come home, and you need time and a place to relax. Therefore, I'm going to allow you to ride out the summer. Play cards every night, but at the end of the summer, I want us to fix the problem. And maybe it's time to build an extension to the synagogue. We need a social hall. Not only that, he says, but this past week I met with contractors, and I got us an estimate. And it looks like we're going to need $40,000 or $50,000, depending on the account, to make this happen. According to some, or one version of the story, Chacham Matloub, on the spot, told the men that they were not going to get to Musaf until he saw 10 men raise their hands and pledge the $4,000 or $5,000 on the spot. Mickey tells me that the money was raised the following week with Mickey's father, the then president of the Knis, Mr. Ralph Shamah. In any event, he identified a problem and a solution and showed compassion throughout. It's a story that shows a very human and compassionate and understanding man, brilliant enough and confident enough to work halacha into real life. Once again, thank you all for being here. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Eli Mansour.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, B'shuta Rabbanim. First of all, I would like to thank Congregation Beth Torah, its rabbi, its committee, and all the good people that have allowed us to come here tonight to talk about Hakham Matloub. Alav Shalom. This is a great project, and Beth Torah clearly should take the full credit of it and deserve it. Hazaku Baruch. I'd like to thank my colleagues for indulging. I know that I'm one of the youngest here, and I'm breaking protocol by speaking first. I realize that, but I do have a wedding that I must attend, so I appreciate their humility by allowing me to occupy this pulpit first. Some of you may ask, what does Rabbi Mansour have to do with Hakham Matloub? It's true, I was very young when he passed away. However, in my family, both on my father's side and my mother's side, both sides considered Hakham Matloub their family rabbi. My grandfather, Joe Safti, alav shalom, was a student. He sat in the shiurim up until the end, including the famous Rambam shiur that he would give in Sha'arei Sion every Motzei Shabbat. My uncles as well on my father's side. Today they have many pictures of rabbis in the sukkah, as you know. When I grew up, there was one picture in the sukkah, Hakham Matloub, that famous picture of him pondering with his fist under his chin, lost in thought. I attended Magen David Yeshivah, 50 Avenue P. There was only 2 pictures allowed in Magen David. When you walked into the lobby, there was a picture of the famed Isaac Shalom, alav shalom. It was an oil painting, and when you went up to the 4th floor, there was that picture of Hakham Matloub on the wall as well. That just shows you the character and the esteem that the community in the yeshiva gave to him. So I'd like to go just with a little history. Incidentally, this book that I have here, Magen Abadi, when my grandfather came ill, he presented it to me, and it has actually his stamp in it, and he said, I want you to take the book, this is my rabbi, I want you to read it, I want you to study his rulings, and I want you to publicize it, and when you do it, you'll do it in my memory. And I do it in his memory tonight as well. There was a rabbi that we all know, and we don't talk about enough, but he's more famous. His name is Hakham Azra'ati, alav shalom. Hakham Azra'ati was the Rosh Yeshiva of Porat Yosef. Rav Rabbanim, he was the rabbi of Hakham Avadia, alav shalom. He was the rabbi of my rabbi, Hakham Baruch, alav shalom, and many others. Hakham Ezra was a child prodigy in Halab. His father, Hakham Yitzhak Atiyeh, alav shalom, saw in this young Hakham Ezra great potential. So we hired for him a rabbi in Halab called Hakham Aslan. Hakham Aslan would teach Ezra Atiyah as a child Masechet Ketubot, specifically Perek Elu Ne'arot, which is a hard Perek. And after that, Hakham Aslan told Rabbi Atiyah's father, he's already independent. He doesn't need any teachers. He knows how to learn on his own. He was a teenager, even younger. But then Rabbi Atiyah's father said that he needs somebody to learn with him as a study partner, as a havruta. And sure enough, they went to the Bet Midrash and they found the most suitable and the most capable and the most bright and the most diligent of all the students in Halab, the young man Shaul Matloub Abadi, alav shalom. And he became the habruta, the study partner in Halab with the Rosh Yeshiva, or I should say the future Rosh Yeshiva, Porat Yosef, Hakham Azra'atiyeh. It is told by testimony that they were the first one in the Bet Midrash and they always were the last one. You would walk into the Midrash in Halab in the Knis Bet Nasi and you would see all the lanterns were out except one lantern on the table where Hakham Ezra and Hakham Matloub would sit and plummet the depths of the Talmud. Later on, when Hakham Matloub would move to New York and Hakham Ezra would move to Jerusalem, there's a famous letter. It's in the Magen Ba'adi. When they were honoring Hakham Matloub at a testimonial after many years of work for the yeshiva. So they read a letter that Hakham Ezra writes to his long-lost friend that he didn't see in 50 years. And in a famous quip, Hakham Ezra says, Ani b'mizrah v'libi b'sof ma'arav, which is the opposite of the way the Yehuda Levi said it. In this case, Hakham Ezra said, Ani b'mizrah, I am in the east, I am in Israel, but my heart is in the west with you. And then he writes, Zachur li yemei ne'urim shehayinu lomdim yachad ba'aram sova kama hayta ahavatenu ki yated teku'ah. Hakham Ezra says, I remember the learning that we had together in Aram Sova. How much was the love between us like a pole that is permanent and cannot be moved. That was the youth of Hakham Matloub. And I read from his own words. He recollects of what his youth was and his diligence in Halab. And I quote, "Be'aram sova molati ra'iti beracha b'limudi He said, I saw blessing in my learning. He says, and so much, ubamiromim sahadi, the heavens are my witness. Sheharbe lelot, many nights, ritzpato hayta le'arsi umedberi. I slept on the floor in the Beit Midrash. He didn't go home. And he says, what was I doing? He says, I woke up. Ve'iruni mitunumati. What woke me up? What was Hakham Matloub's alarm clock? He says, ha'alfasi ve'ha'ashiri barsiloni ve'girundi. These are the Rishonim. Rabbeinu Yitzhak Alfasi the Rif. Ha'ashri is the Rosh. Barsiloni is the Rashba. Ve'girundi is Rabbeinu Yonah. He says, this was my alarm clock. I slept on the floor and woke up to the Rishonim. Ladies and gentlemen, we may ask a question. Is this what Hakham Matloub would want us to do? I wonder. I wonder because there is a story that our family knows very well. I'd like to tell you the story. And we told it over and I heard it from my great uncles many times. When my great grandfather, Abraham Asses, alav shalom, passed away, they would call him in Arabic Sa'a Sitte, because he used to stand straight like 6 o'clock on the hands of a clock. And when he passed away, of course, Hakham Matloub went to the house to console my great uncles. At that point, my uncle Leo, as his alav shalom, who was a famed student of Hakham Matloub, he called Hakham Matloub on the side and he said, we have a question to ask the Rav. He said, my father left us in a will. Well, he didn't leave it in a written will, but he left in a will nonetheless that after the 7 days are up, he does not want us to keep our beards. He wants us to shave. Even though we know the law is for a father, Bala Tashbih, they keep it for 31 days, a child at least. And here, Hakham Matloub came along and he was asked a question, do we listen to our father's will or do we listen to the strict halakha? Hakham Matloub, as very, very common, said, I will get back to you. Let me look in the books. He came to my Uncle Leo the next day and he told my Uncle Leo that I have a reason for you to be lenient. The Gemara says that the main purpose of mourning is yikarat de shechveh, is to give respect to the deceased. And therefore the beard is for the deceased's honor. And here the deceased says he doesn't want that honor. And therefore you must listen to him. They didn't play it tonight, the end of Rabbi Hecht, alav shalom, his speech at the funeral. There in his speech, Rabbi Hecht mentions the importance of yikarat de shechveh. I have no doubt that Rabbi Hecht was alluding to that landmark opinion of Hakham Matloub, that he allowed my uncles to shave after the 7 days. However, he said, but they cannot write in their last will that they'll do away with the Shiv'ah. The Shiv'ah, they must sit. Furthermore, they cannot write anything that's against the Torah to tell their children to do, and it must be in writing or there must be a witness. In the case of my great-grandfather, it wasn't in writing, but there was a great witness. My great-uncle Isaac Shalom was the witness of my great-grandfather telling his Mr. Shalom that he doesn't want his children to hold the law. Incidentally, Hakham Matloub himself, before he would pass away, would leave the same will to his own children, that he would not want them to shave after 7 days. Although I know from my own Rabbi Hakham Baruch and Hakham Yaakov Katzin, they disagreed with Hakham Matloub on this. But it's very hard to disagree with the great scholar of his time. Hakham Baruch would tell me that Hakham Ezra Atiyah told him before he came to America, don't be lenient on 2 things. They're going to tell you they're going to want leniencies on mourning. Don't be lenient with them, because once you start leaning, the whole thing will fall apart. And they're going to want a leniency to shave on Hol HaMoed. Don't be lenient. We all know Hakham Matloub's famous opinion. It's gone around. The 4 reasons that he reminds everybody why he believed it's okay to shave on Hol HaMoed. And Meshivim Ta'ari, we don't question him. However, we see the scholarship that he had, the genius that he had, in order to give these landmark rulings. And the story is told, Mr. Maya Saf alav shalom, in the great book that he wrote on Avelut, recalls this story, that before he gave the ruling, or he gave the ruling and then he got approbation on the ruling of Avelut from many Halabi rabbis, but there was one rabbi that didn't agree with him, the chief rabbi of Argentina, Hakham Shhebar, Alav Shalom, and he told Hakham Matloub, he's wrong. He shouldn't do away with any of the practices of Avelut. And then Mr. Saf writes in his book that when Rabbi Shhebar, or when he went to Brazil, went Argentina to see Rabbi Shhebar, and he told him, why were you against it? He said, I was against it, but let me tell you a story. Rabbi Shhebar said, there was somebody here in Argentina that had passed away, and I went to visit them. And they said, we have a letter from my father. And they gave me the letter. He said, I knew what was in the letter. I knew that the letter was a will asking them, but I purposely did not open the letter till after the 30 days. He says, and when I opened the letter, I saw, sure enough, they were asking for leniency. So Mr. Saf said, why didn't you open it up to 30 days? He says, because although I disagree with Hakham Matloub, I did not want to disagree with him publicly. And therefore, I'd rather not open the letter and not have to make a ruling publicly against Hakham Matloub. And Hakham Yitzhak was Gaon. And look at the fear that the rabbis had in order to show the respect. I remember once having a conversation with the late and great Mr. Sam Catton, Alav Shalom. And I asked Sam, I said, what are your memories of the great rabbi? He said we would come to him and we would want a leniency. We were looking for some sort of legal loophole. And Hakham Matloub would come along and he would put his hands like this. And he would say, my hands are bound. My hands are tied to the Shulchan Aruch and Harambam. And I cannot veer away from those crucial opinions. So it is true, we are very, very committed and loyal to the memory of this great rabbi. It should be pointed out that although the Magen Ba'adi that I have is an old copy, a few years back, one of the great admirers and relatives of the rabbi, Mr. Max N. Shalom, Hashem give him refuah shlema, at cost of his own money, went and reprinted the Magen Ba'adi. And he was very proud of that accomplishment. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Shalom that he came to the synagogue and he gave me a few copies. As a matter of fact, I also consider myself lucky that I had the zechut to learn with Hakham Matloub's son, Simo, Alav Shalom, for many years together. And we enjoyed our relationship, and I was able to get a lot of good anecdotes and stories and feelings about his saintly father and great father. Finally, I will say, there's a famous teshuvah, the first teshuvah in Magen Ba'adi. It's well known. Sha'arei Sion had a small synagogue on Ocean Parkway, and they had sold the synagogue, and with the proceeds of that sale, would take it and build the Sha'arei Sion 2030 Ocean Parkway that we know today. And they did it according to the legal way and what they thought was the halachic way. Of course, they came to Hakham Matloub because some questioned, is this sale legal? Are you allowed to sell a synagogue? There's Kedusha to it, there's rules how to sell a synagogue, especially those that lived next to 1750 Ocean Parkway. They didn't want the shul to be sold, they wanted to pray there. So they protested against the sale. Hakham Matloub received all the information, and again, another landmark decision, he allowed the sale to go through. But it should be pointed out, there was one condition that Hakham Matloub sought to first, that the sale must be delayed until the new synagogue is built. Hakham Matloub clearly would not throw out a congregation until they had a place to go. So that's another genius of the Hakham. Well, the halakha allowed them to sell the synagogue, but he did not want to put them out. That's just one of many beautiful teshuvot that are in this book. Learn the book, learn his teshuvot, and B'ezrat Hashem, I pray that his great zechut and merit should be by us. We should learn from his diligence and his practice and his commitment to the tradition. We have to teach our children that this is the old custom in Halab. Halab is not just eating bizit and playing tole and checkers. Halab was learning and studying and intellect. And B'ezrat Hashem, we should follow in his ways. Yehi zichro baruch, amen ken yeh ratzon.
Thank you, Rabbi. We're excusing you. The Rabbi has to go to a wedding. He's performing the chuppah, so that's why he spoke first. I would like to invite Rabbi Shamah b'chavod.
Thank you, Rabbi and Jeffrey, and all those here in Beit Torah that worked on this project. And I must say that my relationship with Hakham Matloub was not an ongoing rabbi-student relationship, although many times I did interact with him and I did go to his classes, sometimes a night class, sometimes a Shabbat afternoon class, and I did ask him many questions in the course of the years. Many things were stated by Rabbi Eli Mansour in the last few minutes, so I'm going to leave out repetition. And Hakham Matloub was not the type of rabbi that wanted to get honor from the public and take a position of status. It was not his method of studying Torah to do it through very public situations. And it's an art, like Rabbi Jacob Kassan Alav Shalom had the skill and the patience to be able to work with the public and take the public's questions and put in hours upon hours, as I've seen firsthand in the past, and become a chief rabbi. He was brought here with that hope, and he was a chief rabbi, and he served very competently in that position. That was from the early 1930s, but Hakham Matloub was already here since 1920, and even when he first came here, he did part-time go into business, which he writes, it was Asir Melachtecha Arai and Toratcha Keva, and he says that that's what he did. He worked very hard to do that, to be able to focus on his Limud Torah. And even when he first came here, he was already targeted by the Aleppo community from Aleppo because his grandfather, Mordechai Abadi, was considered from the Gedolei Hador at that time. And when Hakham Matloub was born, they had expected him to become a rabbi and to move on. And when they saw his intellect and his interest in studying Torah from very young years, he was expected to become a great Talmid Hakham, and that's what actually happened. But as I said, he preferred a more private life, and he liked to be independent. So even when he first came to America, he did a little business part-time, and then he had to stop that when the Talmud Torah opened, and he became a teacher and had to become the principal also and work for many years, perhaps 20 years or so, on the Talmud Torah. But I would like to say that he always, during all this time, he always was available to individuals who wanted to discuss seriously items and questions in Divrei Torah. And when I started Yeshivah in 1956, full-time Yeshivah, it was an issue that Hakham Matloub was very happy that there was finally a full-time Yeshiva in our community. But that Yeshiva didn't last too long. Hakham Matloub was one of the few that didn't give in to pressure brought by parents, which other rabbis, for whatever the reasons were, they were moved a lot by the parents, that the parent says, why should my son study full-time, day and night, and not have half a day to go to college or half a day to go to work or something like that? And that became a very popular position, and most of the rabbis, except Hakham Matloub, they took that position. At one point, I think it was 1960, I decided to go to an out-of-town yeshiva in Baltimore. And my uncle Ralph and my uncle Abe Shamah who are close with Hakham Matloub, they asked me, he said, look, why don't you go, we'll go together, us three, we'll go to Hakham Matloub, we'll make an appointment, and we'll discuss with him what your plans are, and let's hear what he has to say. You don't have to listen to him. He'll give you good advice. So I agreed. We'll go to Hakham Matloub, we'll hear what he has to say. And he tells me, you're going to go to an Ashkenazic yeshiva. He didn't appreciate what the benefit could be to go out of town and to be free from all family functions for a period of time and to concentrate just on studying. And he didn't appreciate that much, but he had a different concern. He said, if you go to an out-of-town yeshiva that's strictly studying Torah, and one day when you come back to the community, and if you don't find the right position as a rabbi, you won't have an occupation to turn to. You have to continue your general studies. That's what he said. And you have to have the opportunity to go into some profession. And that evening, my uncles thought that was very good advice. And Hakham Matloub said, so therefore, I recommend that you should transfer your thoughts, and you should go to Yeshiva University, and you'll study Torah half a day, for a long half of a day, and you'll study secular studies for the other half of the day, and you'll get a degree in both areas. And I think that way you'll have more hatzlacha. Now, I wasn't thinking in those terms, and I have to admit that I went to this meeting, and I told my uncles that, and they said, look, you don't have to listen, let's hear what he has to say. But one thing I did do is that I did make it my business to go at night, to go to a university and get a master's degree in education. And not that I ever used it, but nevertheless, I did take a bit of his advice in that sense. And I think it helped me in Torah, not so much in having another option of a career, but it did help general studies in the university at a graduate school level is valuable for all rabbis, in my opinion. So that, and then when I saw Hakham Matloub the next time, I was wondering if he's going to say something chastising to me, but no, he was very friendly and he didn't even bring it up, and we just went on to other questions. But that night, he told me a few things. One of them was, it's important for students in yeshiva, and you're going to an Ashkenazic yeshiva, if that's what you'll choose, you have to know Hebrew grammar. You should study Hebrew grammar. The Ashkenazic students don't know Hebrew well. And then he had another thought that he wanted me to take seriously, and that was, he spoke about pilpul. He said he didn't think much of pilpul, and he said, pilpul, that damages the learning of a person. The Sephardi way is we do iyun on the subject at hand, and we do more iyun, and that's it. It's iyun. You study the subject deeply, you know it thoroughly, and there won't be room for pilpul. And sure enough, when Magen Abadi came out, sure enough, in his introduction, he does mention that pilpul, from the days when he was studying in Aleppo by his teacher, Hakham Ezra Sha'yah, he said he taught him that the pilpul, very often, he calls it akum, twisted. Whenever he hears pilpul, he says it that his ears are, what was the word? He said sorem, right? Sorem ha'ozen, it rubs against the ear and it like punctures his vein whenever he hears somebody speaking in the pilpul method. But anyway, I think that was very important advice coming from Hakham Matloub. So one year, when the Mir Yeshiva had asked me to teach a group of Moroccan students that they had brought from Morocco, and they wanted specifically a Sephardi teacher, and they asked me to be the teacher in the mornings, and in the afternoons, I would study in their Bet Midrash, in the Mir Yeshiva Bet Midrash. Hakham Matloub used to come in every now and then. He would take a couple of books off the shelf, he would find a seat and get a stender, and he would sit down for a few hours and study. And he would open a book, and it could be Shelot Shuvot of one of the great Aharonim, and he would study it very carefully for quite a while and thoroughly. He would open the second book and do the same, and then go back to the first book and look, and then he took notes, and that's how he would spend several hours nonstop in that, and that's how he studied. And this happened a number of times in the course of the year. And he lived nearby, and it was a place where nobody bothers somebody who walks in and takes a couple of books off the shelf and puts them on a stender and sits down and studies. And nobody bothered him, and he didn't bother anybody. And I saw that that's the method. It's the old Sephardi method of iyun. You don't have to go through what Ashkenazic rabbis have developed. I'm not saying all, but it had become popular for a period of time. They developed, and Hakham Matloub did not look favorably on that. He did not look favorably on a number of Ashkenazic customs. And for instance, when he saw the Syrian boys, I remember this clearly, he saw Syrian boys that wore their sisiyot with the sisit outside. In other words, the whole garment was under their shirt, but the sisiyot were coming out. And Hakham Matloub, once in a while, I saw this in Shardei Sion, in the Beit Midrash, happened a couple of times. He would ask those boys, what are you doing? He said, well, that's the best way to wear a sisit. Hakham Matloub said, we never saw any rabbis doing it this way. They say, no, we were told that so-and-so, great rabbi of the past, he said, no, that teaching, this is the words he used. He said, Torat Sheker. He said, that is not true. You're saying over a false statement. Those rabbis that were mentioned wore their sisit under their shirt, not the way you're saying, or under their garment. So Hakham Matloub, he felt that we're being victimized here in America because all the yeshivot gedolot at the time were Ashkenazic yeshivot gedolot, and he did his little bit to make sure that we would understand that the Sephardim have a golden tradition, they have great rabbis that were not being respected, which is true, they were not being respected in the Ashkenazic world because their books were not being quoted and they were not being published, and which is changing today. Finally, that they're getting published, and like we see in the case of the Sephardic Heritage Program, where they published quite a few books. Joey Sitt has published quite a few of the Sephardi Aharonim works, and they're bringing their teaching to life. Now, Hakham Matloub, when he taught adult students, I must comment on that. I went to a few of those classes, as I mentioned. The Shabbat afternoon which was a large attendance, and Monday night class. Monday night class was on Ibn Azra's commentary on the Torah. Not so easy for a layman to study Ibn Azra's commentary by himself. And I've heard many complaints, even by rabbis, that they have a hard time to study Ibn Azra without super commentaries that were written on Ibn Azra's commentary, and even then it's hard. But Hakham Matloub, that's what he studied. Now, Ibn Azra is appreciated very much for giving the peshat of the Torah, giving the intended meaning without the, sometimes midrash is intended, then it's also the peshat. So Hakham Matloub taught laymen, and those laymen that came to that class, they were given a course, really I would call it a course if they came to the class regularly, a course in how they should approach Torah, how they should approach Midrash. Midrash and the Peshat of the Torah have to be approached with skill and with a tradition of how this should be done. And those men were fortunate that Hakham Matloub was providing that. And it was also impressive how Hakham Matloub was open to information that would come from the historians, or sometimes in studying, he would tell them, well, we have to consult a map for this to understand a certain thing, or we would have to, or he would want to consult a dictionary to get the nuances of a word exactly right. And on the Shabbat afternoon class, he had many men, and those were the men who, after a few years, if you were part of Hakham Matloub's class on a regular basis, there was a very good chance you're going to become a leader in the community. Those men were businessmen, they had general knowledge, and to be in that class, you had to be advanced in Torah studies. And when we say Hakham Matloub's students were, for the most part, it's from that group that leaders of the community arose. The people that went to that class had to take Hakham Matloub seriously. You knew that you were in the presence of one of the outstanding Talmidei Hachamim around. And that knowledge alone added to the commitment of many of those men. And when they would speak with Hakham Matloub about some project or other after the class, and on whatever the occasion was, they became very deeply committed to those projects. And nobody would want to let Hakham Matloub down. And we know our community, Baruch Hashem, is a very generous community. We have numerous service agency in the community. It's from Bikur Holim and Food Fund and SAFE, and the impetus in many of these, many more organizations, I don't mean to limit it, there are numerous. And when they leave Hakham Matloub's presence, they have much more intent, they have much more seriousness to devote to working on these projects. And sometimes it's not those men, but it's those men's children who take very seriously this opportunity to work on these projects. And I think that we could thank Hakham Matloub, as we have to also thank Rabbi Jacob Kassin for their half a century input each into these very positive aspects of our community. And that we're making this evening tonight, that Beit Torah is making this evening tonight is really providing us the opportunity to think about this and to give Hakham Matloub a little bit of the recognition that he deserves, and that is all to our benefit when we think about these things. And one last point, Rabbi Mansour mentioned the Teshuvot and Magen Ba'adi. I think by now the book is out 50 years. It came out shortly after he passed away. And I think all the senior rabbis have read through most of those Teshuvot in the book, and I'd like to comment about those Teshuvot in general, just to make it clear to everybody that his published responsa in Magen Ba'adi are all clear expositions of the matter at hand. They're thorough, well organized, and in excellent Hebrew. So I think that some of those Teshuvot, you've heard about them. I'm sure you've heard about them, even if you never read them. You've heard about them because there's the one about adoption, a very, very major issue that Hakham Matloub brought up, and he spent a lot of pages on that Teshuvah. And one time, they called me to Lakewood. They said, Hakham Matloub would like to make a special presentation on this issue to all the Sephardic students that are in Lakewood. Can you arrange to bring them one night to Brooklyn? And I did that, and he was very happy, and he gave a lecture of that Teshuvah itself to the Sephardic students. Some were Syrian, and most of them were Moroccan at that time, and it was a very meaningful evening. And Hakham Matloub was at his best. He was doing a little acting in his presentation, and there was humor in it, and so on. And so I already said I'm concluding. So again, I express my thanks to Beit Torah and all those that were involved.
And I would like to express a special thank you to Rabbi Shimon Alouf. I was looking for him to invite him to speak tonight, and just he landed from Eretz Yisrael right away. He called me back. I said that I have missing call. I said, listen, I would like to invite you to speak. In a couple of days, immediately, without saying a word, immediately say, yes, well, what can I? Yes, I am in, and thank you, Rabbi, for being in, honoring us, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Moray v'Rabotay, I try to be very short. It's kind of tired, jet lag. Me meeting with Hakham Matloub, Alav Shalom, is through his books, his book, his Teshuvot. And I had the zechut to meet with his wife, Esther Aleh Shalom. A few times I visited in her house. She was the daughter of Nissim Nahum, one of the greatest philanthropists, Hasid and Mekubal. To talk about the history of Nissim Nahum will take me more than an hour. No, don't forget it. I'm not going to speak about Hakham Matloub. You know too much about him. But Rabotai, just a small thing I just want to add. Do you know, by the way, Esther Aleh Shalom told me how she was introduced to Hakham Matloub when they met each other the first time before they got married in Yerushalayim in the Bukhari section. Very interesting story. I wanted to just to let you know, do you know that after Hakham Shlomo Laniado, which was the first Rosh Yeshiva in Porat Yosef, Shivat Porat Yosef was built in Yerushalayim right after the First World War. It was delayed because of the war, but after the war they started to build, And then the first Rosh Yeshiva was Hakham Shlomo Lanyado Malkishuba. The different Lanyado that we know. And unfortunately, after a few years, he passed away very, very young. And they were looking for a candidate to take over. So after Hakham Shlomo Lanyado was Hakham Ezra Atiyeh. Who was the candidate? Hakham Matloub Abadi. People don't know the story. Hakham Matloub Abadi was the candidate to be Rosh Yeshivat Porat Yosef, which was the only Sephardic yeshiva, famous one, in Yerushalayim, was Hakham Matloub. But Hakham Matloub had a different personality. This is the whole thing. He was a very independent thinker. You see it in his life, his style of life, and his style of halakha. This is the whole point of Hakham Matloub. Not like his grandfather. His grandfather, Hakham Mordechai Abadi Alav Shalom, Geon Olam, was a great, great scholar, but was very charismatic, very tough, a leader. And Halab was not this easy community to deal with. They had section of Musta'arabim and Sephardim and Italian Jews, and it was very strong. He had the control of the public. Hakham Matloub was a very low-key as a person, and he wanted to be independent. And he refused to take the job of Porat Yosef, and right after he came to America. It's exactly 100 years ago when he came to America. Rabotai, I don't want to speak about Hakham Matloub, I want to speak about us. Go back in history, I don't know if Hakham Matloub lived in the right time in our community. I believe if he was today in our community, the yeshiva of Hakham Matloub and the thirst of his Torah would be much more appreciated and used and utilized. But for the time of our community, back when he came here, it was very limited. The focus was on start to establish a community. We're talking about building shul, building businesses, starting life. There was no head, mafi ras, as they say in Arabic, to start to talk about learning Torah all day. But Hakham Matloub was the giant that lived with midgets. Unfortunately, you read his books, you read his book, you read his teshubot. And by the way, everybody using Hakham Matloub his way is exactly like Abba Soloveitchik. You know, it's the same thing. But when you hear Hakham Matloub recording about shaving in Chol HaMoed, you see that you're hearing a voice of a posek that has so much fear, has a fear when he rule halakha. Is dinka in halakha yereh hora'ah, because what he says, Rabotai, I have 4 conditions to allow you to shave in Chol HaMoed. Not hasve shalom against Maran. He was a few times the word hasve shalom. God forbid is not against Maran. It's not against Shulchan Aruch. My psak halakha will go very good also according to Shulchan Aruch. And he gives all his conditions. You see Yirat Hora'ah that he had. Some people today, they want to think Hakham Matloub was lenient. It's not exactly, it's not what you think. Hakham Matloub was confident in his kullah. Like my rabbi, Hakham Ovadia, who knew Hakham Ovadia. You know, Hakham Ovadia always like to picture him as a very lenient. It was not that lenient. There's a lot of things that are lenient at all. However, when he ruled halakha, it was even it was the most lenient halakha that you can even imagine. He said it in such a confidence, because hayum yireh hora'ah, and when they give even the halakha which is lenient, they do it with the confidence. This is the confidence that Hakham Matloub gave to his students. I had experience with Sam Ka'in, Dennis Dweck, Alav Shalom, all the students. And you saw the confidence. This is the point. Why you have confidence? Because Hakham Matloub didn't learn Daf Yomi in English. and made Siyum HaShas every 7 years. Was not the style. You know, some people can learn one daf a day, and some people can learn one masechet a day. Hakham Matloub was me'ayen. He nursed the Talmud like a baby nursing from his mother. It's totally different makeup of a Talmid Hakham. It's not just accumulating knowledge. It's going deep, understanding, going into the roots, digging into the roots of the halakha. When you understand the roots of the halakha, when you go and you see thread by thread into this fabric, and you understand what it's made for, you can go and work with it and apply it in a different way. This was Hakham Matloub. Hakham Matloub lived for our community, and he did an unbelievable service. Until today, we benefit from what he did. But I think what we should learn from as a community, that in our times, we have to establish a center of learned people, Baruch Hashem, after 100 years in this country. We have the means. We have the potential boys, great boys in this community. We have the facilities. We have to bring Hakham Matloub back to life. Is to learn his ways of learning. Is to be posek halakha his way. Is to have students that can write the shubot. Why in Halab 150 years ago there's better conditions to learn Torah than nowadays in America? I don't understand it. This is what we have to do, not to have nights of memories. We have to bring his way back to life. I have experience with boys in this community, Rabotai, you won't believe it. 3rd, 4th generation in America, learning like 200 years ago in Halab. We learn Gemara, my students learn Gemara today like 100 years ago in Halab, like in Yerushalayim. I'm not saying it, it's the people that comes and hear them. How you understand the Gemara, how you understand the Rashi, how you learn Tosafot, how you learn Bet Yosef. We have it at our ends. We have to collect all our power and all our kohot to reestablish this way and not to leave it in the shelves in the book and to take it from time to time and read one page here and one page there. We have to make it part of our lives. This is the best way we can pay back to Hakham Matloub and to make it continuous, B'ezrat Hashem, and to see the community growing. Amen ve'amen.
Sefatayim Ishak. Thank you, Rabbi. Grandson is with us. I would like to invite Mr. Chuck. Itzhak, what is your Jewish real name? Shaul. So what, Chuck?
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is going to be very inadequate based upon what we've heard so far. First, obviously, we want to thank the committee, the rabbi, Jeffrey, everybody here. It's just amazing to have this turnout. This all started about a year ago when Jeffrey Dweck called me to gather material for a booklet being prepared by the shul about my grandfather. I was taken aback since this was not my grandfather's shul, and frankly, I didn't think there were many congregants that knew him personally. Jeff explained to me how important it was to commemorate his legacy. As a small committee gathered material and interviewed those that knew him, the content and their ambitions grew. And now the booklet will become a book. The following few paragraphs are excerpts from the draft pages of the upcoming book. It's a cold Sunday morning in January 1970. Bensonhurst is quiet. About 1,000 men and women shuffle towards 67th Street, which has been closed to traffic. They are converging on the Magen David Knis, built in 1921, to pay their last respects. Their Hakham, community leader and luminary, Matloub Abadi, passed away just before sunset on New Year's Day. Everyone is crying, including his lifelong students, Sam Catton, Joe Catton, Dennis Dweck, Leo Esses, Moshe Faham, Rabbi Faur, Rabbi Harari Raful, Joe Safdie, Abe Hedaya, and many more. The Chacham's elegant wife, Esther, takes her seat with the daughters, Fritzi, Adele, and Evelyn. The plain coffin was carried past Sharet Zion and Magen David on Avenue P, past the institutions he served. The Chacham will be eulogized in the sanctuary, an honor that at that time was only reserved for rabbis and great scholars. Chacham Matloub was the father of that building and the Talmud Torah next door. The rabbi was eulogized by his close friend and student, Mr. Sam Catton, as well as Chacham Yaakov Kassin, Rabbi El Nadav, and Rabbi Hecht. The Chacham's body will be flown later that day to Har HaMenuchot. Matloub was born in Aleppo in 1889, descending from a family of noted rabbis. His bris was during the fast of Tisha B'Av. His father named him Matloub, which is Syria's Charles or Saul, or in Hebrew Shaul. This translates to a request, possibly because his parents had a difficult time conceiving. At 17, Matloub was already teaching small groups of contemporaries and some men much older than him in Syria. His childhood friend, as was already discussed, and study partner was Rabbi Ezra Atiyah. World War I broke out and reached the Middle East. Rather than be drafted to the Ottoman army, he tried to prove to the authorities that he was a rabbi, but he was clean-shaven and wore a suit rather than a beard and a turban, and they did not believe him. So he left Palestine and returned to Aleppo. He eventually moved to Israel, which was then called Palestine, and married Esther Nahum, and they eventually followed Aleppo's Syrian Jews to New York. And the rest is what brought us here tonight. These days, there are probably hundreds of rabbis in our community. In fact, select the last name, and there might be a rabbi by that name. But if you say Chacham, the list gets much smaller. And if you say Matloub, he stands alone, which he often did. As for recognition, he stubbornly resisted, and he always fled from honor and tribute. When a dinner in his honor, and that was one of the photos, was proposed in the 60s for 40 years of community service, he only agreed when they said that it was part of a fundraiser for Magen David. If you look at the photo of the crowd as part of the exhibit tonight, many of you will spot your parents or grandparents. They also presented him with this gold watch, still working just fine. And now, 60 years after we lost him, he is honored again by this Azkara. I asked my cousin, Annette Hidary, to provide us with a few words, which I'm going to read on her behalf. My name is Annette Hidary, and I was the first grandchild of Chacham Matloub and his wife, Esther Nahum. May they rest in peace. Today, we are celebrating his extraordinary contributions as a rabbinical leader, teacher, and author. But there was so much more to him. He was the affectionate grandpa, kissing all of us on both cheeks. He was the playful grandpa, singing nursery rhymes in Arabic, and the dramatic grandpa, intoning the 10 plagues at the Seders. Friday afternoons on Ocean Parkway, school was over, Shabbat was just a few hours away. Grandma would serve coffee and up pastries and take the Kent cigarettes out of the freezer. The women would model the new clothes they bought at Lohman's. Grandpa Matloub would be sitting in his corner chair, never without a large book resting on his lap, holding small pieces of paper containing his mysterious writings. After college, I decided to become a teacher. I took great pride and enjoyed a special bond with him when he supported my career choice. Thank you, Annette. This is from Naomi Wall. My name is Naomi Nahum Wall. I am the niece of Rabbi Matloub Abadi and his wife Esther. My uncle revered Aunt Esther beyond belief. They brought me to America from Israel in 1957. Esther is the daughter of Chacham Nisim Nahum, who supported all the yeshivot in Jerusalem, Egypt, and Syria. He gave each student one gold coin a month to support their families. I have the highest respect for Aunt Esther. She was the woman behind him and the rabbi's rock, especially in his later years. She welcomed all the Rabbanim to their home and served them her delicious food. People would call on him constantly to discuss the important issues of our community. She helped him if he missed some of the words. Esther Abadi deserves the same accolades as the rabbi, as a true Eshet Chayil. We miss them, and we hope that the community follows in both of their footsteps. Thank you, Naomi. It's human nature for us to wish that we are younger than we really are. I'm no different, of course. However, at times I wish I was born earlier, for the simple reason that I could have spent more of my adult years with my grandfather. My grandfather was a stubborn man when he thought he was right. On the other hand, he was diplomatic when he disagreed. He often said, "I would like to know on what research you relied upon to shape your opinion." In the 60s, my grandparents lived directly across Ocean Parkway from Sharet Zion. My grandfather used to cross the street right in the middle across the dividers. Grandma nagged him, "Cross at the corner, it's much safer." So he crossed at the corner. He was hit by a car. But thank God he recovered. When my father, Abe, Alav Shalom, became an Air Force lieutenant bombardier in World War II, he supported him 100%. Grandpa loved America and said we should all respect all the patriotic holidays. I'm almost done, so please let me paint you my picture. If I close my eyes, I see Grandpa with his glasses on, studying an oversized Gemara. If I walk into the kitchen for some kak and return a minute or two later, the Gemara is still there, but this time it's leaning on his chest as he dozed off, probably still dissecting the Rambam's commentary. No doubt, for the last 50 years, he is still teaching his students in the glorious classroom of the Olam Haba. We have his teachings forever. The Sephardic Heritage exhibit in the shul has many fantastic artifacts. In addition to the watch I showed you before, I have a special artifact of my own. I have his shofar. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, she's going to close. Oh, I already told her. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she's going to bring the closing. Thank you, Hakham. Okay, we're going to hear a few words. Can you move on? Can you move on? Thank you. We're going to hear a few words directly from Mrs. Evelyn Rahmey, daughter of the rabbi that came specially from Florida to share with us. Immediately after Mrs. Evelyn, we're going to have the closing by Rabbi Tawil. Rabbi Tawil, I have to tell you something. You are the rabbi, that's the way that Shaul Abadi said, you are the rabbi of the family, so you have the responsibility to bring the bar that high from that legacy. I want to see the great-grandchildren carrying the name Matloub Abadi with the same honor and same Torah through you. Mrs. Evelyn, please.
My father, Hakham Matloub Abadi, was too many things to sum up in a few words, but I would like to mention a few personal details about his life. He was a devout student and teacher of Torah, and even with all of the respect he garnered in the community, he always remained an extremely humble man. I learned at an early age the essence of the word anav. It meant humility, a character trait that he felt the most important in any individual's makeup. He had a deep love for Israel and emigrated there from Aleppo to settle in Jerusalem in 1913, where he met and married my mother, Esther Nahum. He was an early Zionist and it hurt him to have to leave for America due to economic reasons. His original intention was to work in business, not to teach, wanting to provide more for his family. But when he arrived in New York in 1921, there was tremendous pressure from the community elders to establish a Talmud Torah in the new and growing Syrian Jewish community. He saw the need for religious and Torah education and devoted his life to educating both the men and the women in the community. In a time well before it was fashionable, he was an ardent believer in educating our women, both in Torah studies as well as secular topics. My father never opposed my going to City College, and this was 75 years ago. An avid reader, my father always had a book in hand or the Hebrew language newspaper called Hadoar. He looked forward to reading about the political, religious, and cultural developments in the state of Israel and the Jewish world. If he wasn't reading, then it was his little notebook where he would be writing notes no matter where he was. He was interested in the world around him. He only watched TV twice in his life. Once when the Israeli troops captured the Western Wall in 1967, and the second time was when he watched the first man walk on the moon. He was in awe of that. He loved people, he liked giving classes, and he shared a very special relationship with his students. They had a real love for one another, which I believe is partially due to the respect my father always had for each individual. He was a loving and affectionate father and had special nicknames for his daughters, Ferude, Edule, and Evlune. He loved conversing, especially with someone whose intellect he respected, and he had a fantastic sense of humor. The topic had to be stimulating, though. He wasn't a fan of idle talk. A good example of this attitude can be found in the weekly visits my sisters and I made to my parents' house when we were all married. As a ritual, every Friday afternoon, ahead of Shabbat, we would gather for coffee and discuss the events of the day. As many of you who knew him are aware, my father wore a hearing aid. And if our conversation veered toward gossip, he would take the hearing out of his ear and advise us to let him know, and I quote, "Listen, when the conversation offers something of value, let me know, and then I will put the hearing back on." I believe if he stood here today, 50 years later, and saw the community, how the community has thrived, he would be proud of our ability to balance a life of work and community service and Torah. He would be proud of maintaining our tradition while also creating new ones. He would be very proud of our community's continued commitment and love of learning Torah and pursuing its values. Thank you all for paying tribute to my father. It is very touching, and his family appreciates it very much.
With no further introduction, Rabbi David Tawil bechavod.
B'shut Rabbanim, Kahal Kadosh, I want to thank Rabbi Azancot for giving me the opportunity to speak, and to my dear congregant and friend, Mr. Chuck Abadi, for honoring me with this special privilege. I'm truly humbled to speak tonight in front of this great kahal, in front of these great Rabbanim. But I'm also humbled to speak about a giant of a man, Hakham Matloub Abadi alav shalom. I'm 32 years old, and we're commemorating the 50th year of his passing. And so it's obvious that I never had the zechut to meet Hakham Matloub, but I'm sure I share the sentiment with many in this room that although you also did not have the opportunity to meet him, he lives in your hearts, he lives in your minds. He lives in our community and will continue to live in our community because of events like this, and as the rabbi said, through our limud Torah. I feel, though, that I do know him in reading his book, Magen Ba'adi. When you study the Torah, the legacy of somebody, you keep their spirit alive, and you have an opportunity to really meet them. When you read Magen Ba'adi, the rabbi's words jump off the page. You get a sense of who he was, how he lived his life. And although that probably only scratches the tip of the iceberg, it's still something. You can imagine what it would be exponentially to have known him and to have met him and to have conversed with him and to have been in his presence. I'd like to share one small thought as I read his introduction to Magen Ba'adi and you hear anecdotes of the rabbi's life that I think is so important and so meaningful to someone like me. In this week's parasha, Parashat Yitro, we will read about Matan Torah, receiving the Torah, the monumental, the most important event in our nation's history. As we stood around Har Sinai and accepted the Torah that would be our guiding light, both as individuals and as a nation, for all eternity. Our Hachamim ask or tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a guarantor. When a person enters into a contract with somebody, they want to make sure that they're going to get paid if they're lending them money. So you have a guarantor sign the contract. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, who's your guarantor? And after offering a few options that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rejected as the guarantor, Bnei Israel offered up their children. They said, our children will be the guarantor. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted. The Hachamim are teaching us, and I think it was perhaps the most important value in Hakham Matloub's life, the importance of educating our children. The Torah teaches us the most important mitzvah, Talmud Torah, with the words, V'shinantam levanecha, that you will teach your child. Talmud Torah keneged kulam, studying Torah is against every mitzvah in the Torah, equivalent to it all. And the Torah tells us you're going to do it, but not by yourself. V'shinantam levanecha, you're going to teach your children. Hakham Matloub's legacy for me is his commitment and devotion to Jewish education at a time when it wasn't fashionable, when it was difficult. In his poem, which introduces Magen Ba'adi, which, by the way, everybody should have this book in their home. It's a staple of a Syrian Jewish home. He writes in his poem, the Torah's disgrace in our community slices my liver like an arrow. The Orthodox Jewish student suffices with mechanical reading. In his understanding of Chumash, he resembles his neighbor, the Italian or the Irish. And public school education is built from my spoils and my destruction. And the guardians of its walls have injured me and have taken my shawl from me. For Hakham Matloub, there was nothing more distressing than seeing a young child who was not given the gift of studying Torah, who was not given the precious opportunity to learn how to read, how reading in a proper mivtah, reading in a proper way according to our traditions, was so important to him, but not a mechanical reading, an in-depth reading, one that had meaning, inspiration, where the words jumped off the page and came to life. And when unfortunately he had to leave the yeshivah, there was nothing that distressed him more than the fact that he could not sit in front of a classroom of students and be able to teach the youth of the community. He understood this idea that our rabbis gave to us, that the Torah cannot live, it cannot persevere, it cannot continue unless we teach it to our children. As somebody who went to Magen David Yeshivah, and had the privilege for 1 year to teach in Magen David Yeshiva and afterwards in Yeshivat Barkai and now in Hillel Yeshiva. I'm eternally grateful for Hakham Matloub Abadi's contributions to a Jewish education in our community. I could not be standing here, and for all the parents and all of the rabbis and all those who benefit from Jewish education, none of us can stand here and not appreciate what Hakham Matloub did for us in the area of chinuch, of establishing a yeshiva. I think so many of us take yeshiva day school for granted, but it's not something that we should. It's something we should appreciate, something we should continue to support in any way, shape, or form that we can, as parents, as students, as rabbis. It's something that we want to keep together and keep on Hakham Matloub's legacy. We have to continue the idea of Vishinantam Levanecha, of teaching our children. And I'll just close by saying that I draw a tremendous amount of strength from Hakham Matloub in this area, because teaching children is not easy. There are many days, and I'm sure I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, there are many days that you come home from yeshiva, from teaching, from a hard day, and the children test your patience. They try your resolve. And there's many days that I must admit, you come home and you say, why do I need to do this? Why? I could just go, I could learn, I could write, I could work, I could do something else. Why should I subject myself to paper airplanes flying across the room and all kinds of different issues? Why should I do that? And then I think to myself, if someone of Hakham Matloub Abadi's caliber, a Ga'on Olam, someone who is light years greater than myself, could put himself in front of a classroom and teach young students and feel that that was the most important thing that he can do in his life, how could I say that I'm beyond that? How could I say that I'm better than him to not stand in front of that same classroom and continue his legacy and teach our children? I think that for all of us leaving here tonight, there's been so many moments of inspiration, so many ideas, but my message to you is to take away something that you could do with chinuch, to keep Hakham Matloub's legacy going by teaching your children, by being tomech in our yeshivot, by continuing the legacy of Jewish education to our children, because that is the only guarantee that we have that HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepted that our way of life will continue to be preserved.
Chazak u'Baruch. Tonight is Rosh Hashanah La'ilanot. Tonight is Tu Bishvat. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh. The man is the trees compared to the trees in the field. As the men come with roots, and we're talking about roots of Hakham Matloub Abadi, to his grandfather and a long dynasty of Hachamim, and very strong and inside of direct connection to Shamayim. So you see the body of Hakham Matloub work so hard to bring shade to this community, to produce fruits that we just taste a little bit of that. And I consider myself also a little bit of that taste since I was around his students. So Baruch Hashem, we had the privilege to see this tree growing and to continue. We have a responsibility to make it, trim it, continue, let them produce fruits on, and keep this legacy alive. So now go, let's say berachot lechvot Tu Bishvat.